All right. Well, on behalf of the Northwest Gas Association and the Northwest Alliance for Clean Transportation, we're all happy you're here today for this webinar. We do have a scheduled Q&A session for the end, so if you want to hold your questions until that time, that'd be great. You can type them in the chat feature or raise your hand at the end, or just pipe up and you will be able to ask that question. So I'm going to turn it over to Alex. Alex, it looks like we have most everybody on the line right now, so why don't you go ahead and take over?
Very good. Thank you, Judy. Thank you for coordinating this. This is Alex Shea. As most of you know, I'm the membership services person with the Northwest Alliance for Clean Transportation. As most of you also know, the Northwest Alliance was founded at the request of the gas industry to increase use of both conventional and renewable natural gas as transportation fuel in medium and heavy duty vehicles throughout the Pacific Northwest. And we all also understand that renewable natural gas plays an important role in that, both because of the value of the associated credits and because of the RNG's potential to reduce the carbon intensity of the natural gas fuel mix, which is also very important. And so we thought it would make sense to spend an hour over lunch and explore what it takes to identify and successfully develop an RNG project.
Thank you, everybody. I assume everybody can see the screen at this moment. My name is Robert Lems. I am the General Manager for DMT, Clear Gas Solutions. And in the next 10-15 minutes, I want to talk a little bit more about the technology behind biogas upgrading and the different kind of solutions that are on the market and how to make the right decision for your project. So I myself, I came to the USA about 5 years ago. I worked for DMT for almost 15 years, first as a process engineer and then later on as R&D manager. So most of the products that we're now presenting on the markets, I've developed as the R&D manager back in the Netherlands. And 5 years ago, we started to also do projects here in the US. So I started the office in Portland, Oregon. And currently we have about 50 people here in Oregon and about 70 people back in the Netherlands. DMT itself, it's a family-owned company. It's in operation for almost 33 years. We've always done biogas upgrading and desulberization. Since 2015, the office in Portland is opened, and currently we have about 20 projects sold in the US, ranging from very small to very big. So we have projects from Hawaii all the way till New Jersey, and all the way from north in Canada, all the way to the south in Texas. So we have projects and plants all over. An interesting chart to show is this one, where we see the different kinds of industries that we deliver. So wastewater treatment plants, agriculture, dairy, source separate organics, and landfills, and the spread in the size of the projects that you normally encounter. So we see our wastewater treatment plants, all the references are between about 200 to 700 SCFM, 800 SCFM, which is a decent size to make this commercially work for a wastewater treatment plant. On the dairy, we see a bit of a broader spread. Lately, most of our plants are in the smaller dairy sector, about 200 to 300 SCFM. Although sometimes a project developer tries to agglomerate them to have several sites jointly to one technology. So biggest site currently for the dairy is about 3,000 SCFM. And for source separated organics and landfill, there we see really the big sizes. That has mainly to do because you need more equipment. The projects are more complicated. So you need more the benefit of skill to make these work. So most of those plants are in the, let's say, 2,000 to 4,000 SCFM range. To do biogas upgrading, there's several steps you have to do from the source of the biogas to the utilization of the biogas. So the source can be anything from a digester or a landfill or an anaerobic reactor or even a lagoon. And the applications are also pretty wide. So the most commonly is a direct injection into a pipeline. But we also see more and more either an application as CNG, so that's compressed natural gas that can be utilized in vehicles for fuel, or it can be utilized as a virtual pipeline, which means you compress to CNG, and then you bring it with a truck to a central injection point. So especially for the smaller plants, on the dairy farms, we see this more and more being applicated to have one injection point, but a virtual pipeline between several farms. Something not utilized too much is LNG, but you can compress the gas further to liquid natural gas, mainly used again in transportation fuel for long-term driving or even for ships. And then another application is liquefied CO2. From the waste stream, you can liquefy the CO2 and utilize that again in, for example, food and beverage, for packaging of food and dry ice. So how do you get from the biogas to your biomethane or your CNG? There's always 3 steps in common for the different projects. There's always the pre-treatment first, which usually consists of taking out the moisture, taking out siloxanes, VOCs, and H2S, but also boosting the gas to the right pressure for the next step, which is compression. So next step is compression. Most technologies work between 100 PSA to about 300 PSA. So depending on the pipeline or the application that you have for your biomethane, there might be another compression step afterwards. And sometimes the 200 PSI is sufficient to directly go into your gas grid. And then the core of the business is truly the CO2 removal. So there's different technologies on the market, which I'll show later, like PSA, water wash, or membrane technology that will separate the CO2 from your methane. So we utilize membranes, which has a very clean separation between the CO2 as a vent gas that you can then reutilize, or the biomethane going to the gas grid or your virtual pipeline. People always ask, like, what is the best technology to select? And there's a lot of things to look at if you look at the technology. It's your power consumption, it's your methane slip, it's the amount of chemicals used, your operations, the price, of course. But one of the things that we see time over time is that the biggest benefit between the technologies is not that one technology is a little bit better in power and the other technology is better in methane slip. It is how well you can operate the technology and how well the uptime is. There are plants in operation that only have an uptime of 80 or 90%. There's plants that are in operation and operate at 99%. And that is where you make your profit. That last 10% of uptime, that is where most of your profit is. So it is important to select a technology that has proven itself, that is simple to operate, and that matches with your site. So that means it matches with the climate conditions, it matches with the operators on site, it matches with the skill set. So that will be, for me, one of the key takeaways if you're selecting equipment. Don't look at the details, look at the methane slip and the power consumption, but main thing to look at is, can you, as an operator and as a project owner, reach that uptime that you need? And every technology provider will guarantee you an uptime of 95% or 98% with all the small footprints in. You have to have the right operators, you have to have the right biogas. So choosing the technology that fits with your biogas and your site is important. So coming back to the cleaning of the biogas, another choice to make in most of the plants is your desulberization. And the first step that I showed is cleaning the biogas from VOCs, siloxanes, and H2S. And H2S can be a very big cost impact on your operation. You can see H2S numbers from 500 ppm to 10,000 ppm. So especially at the higher numbers, quite quickly it becomes expensive to remove the H2S. So what you see here is on the left side is the amount of H2S that you have in your gas, and on the downside, the flow rate. And this in general gives you an idea about what kind of technologies to pick. So if you have a small gas flow rate, let's say, for example, a farm-based plant with only 200 SCFM, and you also have only a low amount of H2S, about 500 ppm, you would use absorption media, like an activated carbon system or a ferrosorb system, sulfur treat, to absorb the H2S. If you go a little bit bigger in size and flow rates, you have a chemical scrubber, which uses caustic at a high pH to scrub down the H2S and remove it. And in that way, you have a very reliable system, but you still have a bit more operational cost with your caustic. Next step up is a biotrickling filter. Here you have bacteria doing the work, so your operational costs are almost zero. The drawback of this system is that you have to add oxygen to the gas, which for biogas upgrading you prefer not to do. So this is a system usually only applicated for biogas to power or to heat. And for the real big amounts, we use a biological regeneration step. So what you see here is a scrubber. In the scrubber, it's the same as the chemical reaction. You take out the H2S at alkaline pH, but without using any oxygen. And then you have a separate bioreactor, which oxidizes the H2S into sulfur. So the nice thing about this system is that it has a very low operational cost and no waste stream. The sulfur that gets out, you can reutilize that in your digestate. The drawback is that it has much more operational components than, for example, the chemical system or the absorption media. So in regards to downtime and uptime, you have to know that you can operate a biological system and you have the time and expertise to operate a system. But looking at for some numbers, for example, here you see a 1500 SCFM plant with 3000 ppm of H2S. You see if you looked at absorption media, investment is pretty low, 250, 350 for investing in the equipment, while for the biological regeneration it's a 1.7 million investment. If you calculate on a yearly basis, your absorption media are close to $1 million, while for the biological regeneration you only spend about 50K. So you see if you go to high flow rates, high H2S, it makes sense to go to a biological system. But again, keep in mind, the uptime is still the most important. So we have both plants in farm-based that use the ferrosorb because the reliability, and at a farm, you don't have an operator that knows how to operate a biological system. And we have the biological regeneration in the same kind of scale, for example, where we have an industrial partner or a developer that has his own operators on site. Same for the gas upgrading. If you look at the gas upgrading, one of the first plants we've sold is water wash, and this is roughly how a water wash system works. So we have the compression, as pointed out before, at high pressure, like with your soda, you're absorbing the CO2 in the water. When the gas comes out, it's wet, so then you have a dryer system in between. And the water is then reused by shaking your soda, your beer can, and opening it up, so all the CO2 comes out again. You have a stripper with a blower, recirculation pump, and a chiller. So it's quite a process, but it's highly efficient. So if you have the right conditions, not too hot, not too cold outside, you have the right operators, you have the time to spend on this with a process engineer, it's a very good system. But we've seen it takes a lot of time to learn the system and to optimize it to a high uptime. So what we're doing now is membrane technology, where we get the biogas through these membrane modules, and on the outside, the retentate, you get your biomethane, while on the permeate, you get your CO2 out. So there's not much of interference with outside conditions. There's not much interference with the technology itself, the operator. If you run your compressor, it's just a set point, and that's the CO2 that comes out. And the nice thing is that the CO2 comes out with part of the oxygen, with part of the H2S, and with the water. So you dry the gas in the same step as you're doing the CO2 removal. With membranes, you can have different kind of qualities. So you can have a 1-stage, a 2-stage, or a 3-stage. And with increasing amount of stages, you have your better recovery. So at the 3-stage, we can get 99.5% recovery of all your methane, which results in a very low CCI number. So your CCI number, your carbon credit intensity number, defines partially how valuable your gas is. So we see more and more, especially on farm-based systems, that people choose the 3-stage because the overall money you get for your biomethane is much higher than with a single stage or a dual stage. If you look at the different kind of technologies to choose from, like I said, you have your water wash, you have a chemical absorption or amine scrubber, you have PSA, pressure swing absorption, membrane separation, and cryogenic. So this just, in a very big overview, gives you a kind of an idea which technology fits best where. So for example, a water wash is still, I would say, overall the most used technology, historical. But we see that the amount of water wash systems being sold new is declining, mainly because of the complexity of the system. We do still see there is a market for amine scrubbing, especially where you have heat available. So amine scrubbing works on heat rather than power. So if you have free heat available and you're operating at a low pressure gas grid, an amine scrubber might be a good fit. PSA has a big benefit in regards to oxygen and nitrogen removal. They are more resilient to removing also these components. So we see a better fit for digesters that's maybe having a little bit of oxygen in there, or landfill gas applications. Membrane separations, that's the one that you see now in Europe being utilized for about 80–90% of all cases. And in the US, it's up and coming. I would say it's being utilized for about 40–50% of the cases. And it's, again, mainly about the uptime and reliability. We've sold these now up to 4,000 SCFM. while in the past those were only financially feasible up to about 500 SCFM. And then the cryogenic is cooling the gas so that you have every step, you have the CO2 liquid coming out, oxygen liquid coming out. It gives you very high purities, but the complexity is there. It's not really a proven technology yet or utilized much. So if people want to know more about the different kind of technologies for the case that you're utilizing, I can set something up and make a comparison for what you're making and indicate what is the best technology to use both on desulberization and gas upgrading. Just as an example, this is our plant that has been the longest in operation here in the US. It's at Fair Oaks, Indiana, together with A&P Americans. It's a dairy and manure of 3 different digesters and farms brought together at 1500 SCFM and 3000 ppm. And we've installed both the membrane system and the biological regeneration system, the Sulfurex Bier. So you can see we've designed it for about 1500 SCFM. They're running to similar conditions. They're running at slightly higher ppms of H2S. And we're seeing a very steady line for the CO2 at the outlets of about 2%. You see this total setup here with the containerized membrane system and the compressor, the pre-treatment on the right side with the desulberization, the polishing step, and then the biological desulberization in the beginning. Caustic consumption, very stable, less than 1 pound per pound of caustic, so very low compared to absorption media or chemical scrubbers. And then the uptime, as long as you have good trained operators, the uptime can be as high as over 95% on the MS and over 99% of the desulberization. So that's in very short, trying to explain a little bit the different kind of technologies that are on the market, the pros and cons, and like I said, try always to match your site conditions, your operation capacity with the technology that you're choosing. If you're losing on downtime, it's just a waste of the investment that you're doing. And if there's questions, let me know or come back for them later. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Robert. Jim, we're ready for your presentation at this time.
I will share my screen. Sorry for that, had some technical difficulties, but I think we're up and running now. So thank you, Judy, and thank you guys for your patience in me getting my technical problems resolved. So I thought might be worth just a quick second on an overview. We're going to spend the next 10, 15 minutes real quickly go over some background of Ameresco, some projects that we've done, why RNG is so hot right now, look at some of the project structures that have been successful and the pathways that have taken us there. And then if you're looking for a partner, what makes a strong partner to have your project be successful. Real quickly on Ameresco, I won't belabor all this information on here, but we've done over $6 billion worth of energy related projects. For 8,000 customers. We have over 1,000 employees and 70 offices located throughout North America. If you count up the dots on this map, you should come up with somewhere close to 70 offices throughout North America. We own and operate over 40 biogas projects, and I'll dive into on the next slide more detail on that. And then also we have been fortunate enough to receive a bunch of awards from the EPA and other regulatory agencies. Safe to say that we build some solid projects, and we've been very fortunate to be awarded some awards for that. So again, here's our 40 some projects across the U.S. The green dots are landfill gas to electricity. The blue dots are medium BTU gas, direct pipeline, where you're basically just cleaning up some impurities like siloxanes and hydrogen sulfide, obviously moisture and particulates, but you're going probably straight into a boiler and medium BTU state, which is probably somewhere around 500 to 600 BTUs per cubic foot. The golden dots represent our RNG projects on landfills, the golden stars on our RNG projects at wastewater treatment plants. And then the green stars are the wastewater treatment plant to electrical projects. And you can see somewhere up around near Michigan, there's a dot that has yellow and green. And I think that's going to be more common. We have several projects in California that we are going to run the renewable natural gas project off of landfill gas to electric projects that are already existing to improve the CI score. And then in California, certainly displace retail rates to make the project that much more economically viable. All of those projects that you see on that map add up to about 200 plus megawatts. And I put the equivalent there, that little E behind the W. For the projects that were RNG or medium BTU, we converted that to their corresponding amount of megawatts it could produce. So again, a real wide variety of projects that Ameresco has. This is, I won't belabor all of these projects either, but I do want to just point out a couple. The first column, middle row, you'll see a BMW in the background. This is a project where we supply landfill gas to BMW's largest plant in South Carolina. If you look hard enough, you can see the former director of the EPA, Christy Todd Whitman, with our beloved CEO, George Sakalaris, off to the right in the suit. And I'm going to hit in more detail on our RNG projects, which would be the Woodland Meadows project, the City of Phoenix, and the San Antonio project. The McCarty Road on the bottom left is a project that we are currently selling gas to Anheuser-Busch in a medium BTU state. We are currently converting that to an RNG plant that should be operational sometime at the end of this year or early next. Again, this just shows the wide variety of our portfolio on landfill gas, on wastewater treatment plant, biogas, permitting in some of the toughest areas of the country. And then our pipeline experience, which for RNG projects is invaluable, going under riverbeds, under railroads, wetlands, roads, interstates, and highways, something that we've become very adept at doing. Here's our Woodland Meadows project. It was our first landfill gas to RNG project. And it is not using a DMT, sorry, Robert, technology, but the project that I mentioned in Texas that's coming on later this year, we are using DMT's technology, and then also for a couple projects in California. This is the largest of Ameresco's projects. I believe it's in the top 10 largest in the U.S., so quite a large project up in Michigan that we're real proud of. This is in San Antonio, we take biogas from a wastewater treatment plant and turn it into renewable natural gas. This project was our first project. It's been operational since 2010. And it was the first of its kind on a public-private partnership with the municipality on a wastewater treatment plant to renewable natural gas project. Again, one that we're real proud of. This is our most recent renewable natural gas project done for the City of Phoenix. Actually, the wastewater treatment plant is owned by 5 different cities. You can see under that photograph, Phoenix, Glendale, Mesa, Scottsdale, and Tempe. And talk about a challenging project. To get 5 city attorneys and 5 city councils to agree on anything was a monumental task. And this one was certainly challenging, but we got it done. And it is the largest wastewater treatment plant to renewable natural gas project in the U.S., which probably means in the world as well. And it became operational last year. So there's a sneak peek into the different project structures that we contemplated for this project. We had originally, the city wanted a third-party ownership. We met some financing challenges in the project. It was early in the development of RNG markets, and lenders really weren't comfortable loaning projects that didn't have a fixed offtake. So it was really a merchant play project that experienced some challenges. We're able to overcome those now. So the city stepped up and said they would look at owning the project. Phoenix was interested in it. This was shortly after the financial crisis, and really the epicenter of some of the foreclosure markets were right there in the Phoenix area. So some of the cities were really reeling from lost tax revenue, and they weren't really interested in doing the project. And then the risk of the merchant plant was troublesome to some of the members as well. Ameresco has a great relationship with Arizona State University. They have campuses on all 5 of these cities. So they were comfortable having ASU come in and own it and take the gas. We did a 9-month evaluation of the project, and the staff was very supportive of the project. But in the end, the Board of Regents was hesitant to approve it just because some other large capital improvements that they had going on at the time with Sun Devil Stadium and some other things like that. So in the end, again, Ameresco was the last man standing. And by this time, the markets had evolved a little bit to where the financing, we could overcome that. But the city of Phoenix had actually set some money aside when they were interested in owning it and said, well, why don't we put that money to use and finance the project? So that's how that project got done. And I'll take a step back real quick and on why the RNG market is so hot right now. When you have biogas, you can do a couple things with it. Like I said, make electricity or sell it in its medium BTU state. Well, electric prices are relatively low across the country. The REC market is very weak in most of these markets because of solar. Natural gas prices are at historic lows. So medium BTU projects are not all that viable. And as Robert had mentioned, the cleanup technology is proven. So, and then recently, I'd say in the last few years, the keen interest by the natural gas pipeline owners, I don't think a day goes by that I don't get an email, an RFP, or a webinar on decarbonizing the natural gas grid in the U.S. So lots of interest from pipeline owners in either allowing this gas to be in their pipes or actually even owning the projects or buying the output. I think everybody on this call knows the robust RIN market and LCFS market. This next slide graph shows the historical value of, and this is based on landfill gas, and the reason I put that in there is because that impacts the carbon intensity score, that if you're lucky enough to get into California and realize that revenue, you're going to get in today's market, see off to the right, over $25 per MMBTU. Those are gross values. I would not count on getting that as the net value going into your pocket. But you can see somewhat volatile. Certainly the middle of last year, projects were really difficult to develop at that time and find money to do the projects or find anybody really interested in the offtake. But the market has rebounded. Not to its former highs back in the 2017-16 range, but certainly still a very healthy, robust market. All right, so now I think what really you guys want to hear is how do we get these projects done? So I'm just going to go through a couple of our, well, I guess a handful, 3 of our wastewater treatment plant project structures. And this first one with the city of San Antonio, we call it a gas purchase agreement. The city didn't want to put any of their own up, so they're looking for a third party to come in and do the project. They didn't want to use the gas on site because the electrical rates were very low. The city of San Antonio owns its own municipal electrical utility, so they had a sweetheart deal. And then in essence, we are providing, they're providing the gas in exchange for a royalty. So the vast majority of our projects, whether they be a municipality or a private landfill owner or another private entity, this is the way the projects are structured. The city of Dallas was a tolling agreement. Again, they didn't want to put their own capital up. They wanted somebody else to do that. And really what they do, and in exchange for the biogas, we provide electricity and heat at below retail rates. And this could be analogous in an RNG project, but probably not the best structure. It's a performance-based structure. Ameresco only gets paid if we perform. The city of Philadelphia, and the reason I put this one up here is really to highlight the financing structure here. It's a tax lease. It's a very complicated deal. This was done during the first stimulus package back in 2008, 2009 timeframe, and we wanted to capture that money, but that money was only available to private companies. So our finance group, which I think are some of the best and brightest in the industry, really came up with a way for us to utilize not only that tax money, but also the low cost of financing. I mean, no private company is going to get money cheaper than a municipality can through a bond or other mechanisms. And I really want to highlight it here, that the transparent and collaborative process, that these things are, I call them marathon roller coaster rides, that they have all their ups and downs, and it has to be transparent. It has to be working together. And you need to take a lot of reiterations of the models and estimates and structures and how the project will work. And as you saw in the City of Phoenix example. So the pathway to development, not all projects go this pathway, but this is, I think, a pretty good description of how most things are done. So in the first stage, you really try to get a general understanding of what the costs are, how the project's going to be structured, just gather baseline data. So at this point, it's just, there's nothing inked. It's just all informal or maybe formal discussions. The next is a non-binding memorandum of understanding, where you try to understand a little bit better the financing of the project. You do preliminary capital and operating budgets. You do a return on investment analysis and make a go-no decision or go-no-go decision. If it's a go, then you enter into typically a non-binding letter of interest or a term sheet. This is really where the money gets spent, where you're doing some detailed design, you're doing some preliminary permitting, and really defining the deal, the ownership, and who's taking risk, and the risk sharing opportunities. And then also going through a reiterative process of the financial models, and then kind of laying the groundwork for the definitive agreements. And in most cases, again, that would be a gas purchase agreement. After that's done, you go to the design build phase, go to the operational phase, and then after that, you really end up reaping the financial and environmental benefits of these projects. So people on the call that are interested in developing a project, I can't overemphasize the need to hire experts, people that have done this before, but then also have the cash on hand or credit line to start the project, and then access to capital to complete the project. All of the parties that are in the deal, including the fuel supplier and the off-taker, and even your EPC and O&M contractors, need to be creditworthy. You have to have EPC and O&M contractors that have performance guarantees that they can meet. So it's important to partner with people that have done this before and are creditworthy. This is hitting again on the importance of the financing of the project, and the need to partner with somebody that has experience in all of these types of financing. And there's actually even more than that. But financing is an extremely important part of the project, and you want to partner with somebody that's done it a multitude of different ways, because there is more than one way to skin a cat on these projects. And again, I can't overemphasize the amount of importance on having a local partner, somebody that has a team that understands the local technical and operational problems, have a local leader. Permitting with local agencies is critical. The policies and procedures of the local building codes is extremely important. And then lastly, and this is my last statement, I think I'm going quick, but I'm trying to stay under the time constraints, is understanding the unique pathway for each of the people that have a project, because every project is unique, every client is unique. And I think structuring that in a creative way with somebody that has done that before and has access to the knowledge and the know-how and the horsepower to get it done is critical. So Judy, how'd I do on time?
You are good. We did have one question on your slides. What is the CI in the chart based on?
It's based on a landfill. I don't think I know the exact number, but it's probably somewhere in the 30 to 40 range.
Okay. With that, is Max, I guess we're up for you.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
We can. And I am going to go back, see if I can. James, could you stop sharing your screen for me?
Yep. Sorry.
It's okay. And I will go back to sharing my screen here. There we go. All right, Max, it's all up to you now.
All right, thanks. Well, first of all, thanks Judy and Alex and the team at the Alliance for inviting me to participate today. I really appreciate it. Excited to be here with very esteemed panelists. So that's an honor. Thanks, guys. So I was asked to come just give a couple of remarks today, just a few minutes here, probably 10 minutes, so we can leave time for Q&A, to talk a little bit about how lenders are starting to view this space. I think, as we heard just now from Jim, historically there was not a lot of debt in this space in renewable natural gas, or really in bioenergy project financing in general. And I think that's starting to change now. And we're hoping to be one of the earlier entrants in that market. And I'll tell you a little bit why, and hopefully give you some thoughts in conclusion to leave with. So just a quick intro to who we are. Live Oak Bank is based in Wilmington, North Carolina. We started in 2007, and our core business is we're a small business lender. So unlike large banks that have branches across the country, we don't have checking accounts. We don't do mortgages or car loans. We're specifically a business lender, and we are chartered to provide capital, or what should be affordable capital, to historically underserved markets. So industries that for whatever reason or nuance or perceived risk have not historically had access to affordable bank debt. And oftentimes we do that by partnering with the federal government. We are the largest SBA, Small Business Administration lender in the US, and the largest USDA, government guaranteed rural development lender as well. So we utilize a lot of their programs to help leverage some creativity into getting capital into these markets. Our energy and infrastructure team, we started about 5 years ago, focuses on project finance. So we don't really do SBA loans. We do mostly conventional non-recourse as well as USDA guaranteed loans for development of everything from water, municipal water and wastewater treatment, and distribution infrastructure, to solar, wind, hydro, thermal, combined heat and power, PV plus storage, grid resiliency and smart batteries, to bioenergy and biofuels, which is my area of specialty. And we've historically, in my space, financed anaerobic digesters, both RNG and electricity, landfill gas, both RNG and electricity, some food waste, and other types of refuse-derived fuel projects, and MSW separation technology, we'll say, as well as some small-scale biorefineries for liquid fuels and renewable chemical manufacturing. So that's just a snapshot of what we've done. So the question is what do banks want to see in this space? And I think when you look at traditional project finance historically versus what debt partners are commanding today, there's a lot of similarities, but some things have changed, and I think potentially for the better. So the traditional schematic of what does it require to get a bank to invest in a project are a lot of the things that Jim just mentioned. So EPC, feedstock, technology, offtake, interconnection, those are kind of the pillars of the different categories of risk that we might look at. And the way that we view these deals is we typically put together sort of a composite weighted average risk grading score, because every project is different. They all have their own nuances and different risk parameters. And we try to normalize that depending on things like geography or local government nuances, different pieces of legislation. There's a lot of different variables that go into evaluating one of these projects. But the consistent theme that we see for successful projects, again, is exactly what Jim said: surround yourself with experts. All of our projects that have been successful have surrounded themselves with a thorough team of experts in every category of project development. And that includes things like a good CPA to balance your books, an expert legal counsel who is proficient in contract negotiation and potentially project finance, if that's the path that you're seeking, and even environmental and permitting consultants and engineers who can help you navigate some of the challenges with different jurisdictions, depending on where you're trying to develop a project. The next pillar, I guess I'll call them, is site control and the sort of the host partner. So depending on the kind of feedstock that you are addressing, It's obviously essential to identify a really collaborative relationship with a host partner, if that's the feedstock provider or the ultimate beneficial owner of the project or recipient of the energy, or whatever the structure may be. We've found that a lot of friction can be created when those parties are not mutually incentivized. So we oftentimes will see projects where developers will try to find low-hanging fruit, like an existing electricity project, and convert that to RNG, especially in the landfill space or even in the dairy digester space. And it's important to make sure to do your due diligence on things like gas rights agreements. So for example, with a landfill, if the landfill gets paid based on just the raw quantity of gas that they deliver, they might be incentivized to just pump gas through your system. But as Robert probably knows, you don't always want to be necessarily drawing gas into a landfill 24/7. There's some nuances with the cleanup technology and RNG that developers need to be aware of to maintain consistency with their pipeline standards. So there's little nuances like that. It's important to make sure that your site host or your partner there and feedstock provider is mutually incentivized to not only maximize the economic return, but make sure that they're optimizing project uptime. Feedstock, as a bank, the risk assessment here is kind of there's two parts. There's concentration risk, and then there's supply chain risk. So a lot of the projects we analyze have a single feedstock provider, which in that case, we would expect them to be a very strong counterparty, like a municipality, a wastewater treatment plant, a landfill that doesn't have an aggressive organic diversion program, or a strong dairy or an animal ag operation. Or you can rely less on the strength of your host and more on the fungibility or availability of feedstock. So a lot of food waste projects or co-digestion projects will bring in feedstock from a wide supply basin and collect tip fees, and sometimes that can diversify your risk in that manner. Technology, it's easy for a bank to say we don't want to take a chance on something new, and it's not that we want to discourage innovation necessarily, but to Robert's point earlier, we need to know that the system's going to work, and it really, for us, it comes down to integration. I think as we see this industry mature, it's really important that we are financing really creditworthy counterparties, but more specifically system integration that's proven that works, so that this industry can begin to coalesce around a framework that actually works, so that we're not continuing to learn lessons for several more decades. There's this big push in the market right now for RNG, both from consumers and producers, and I think we need to capitalize on that and really, as an industry, create a repeatable framework. On the offtake side, it's been challenging for banks to get their heads around legislative risk and market volatility. The RFS program, it really is strong, and we're not concerned about it going away. So we don't see that as binary risk, but it's the unpredictability of small refinery exemptions that can just artificially change the demand without much notice. That is what's concerning to us. So to the extent that you can work with counterparties who can help bear some of that risk, and it's not entirely on the bank who does not have upside to counter the downside, that's ideal. And the good news there is we're starting to see that market mature. We're starting to see the voluntary markets marginal cost decrease, and we're starting to see their appetite for long-term fixed price for RNG increase, not always necessarily directly tied to CI score. So for example, we're seeing landfill gas fixed prices increase almost $1 per MMBTU per year in that market, and that's a really good signal for us. We're also starting to see more financial hedging available, especially on LCFS credits in both Oregon and California, as well as insurance products that can help get a bank comfortable with taking some of that merchant pricing risk. And if the project can bear those costs, it could be worth it. The trade-off could be worth it to get a lower cost of capital for a majority of the capital costs. Let's see, running out of time here, so I'll keep moving quickly. The kinds of debt that are that's available in the marketplace. We've seen more creativity recently. So again, I think that's another positive signal. Historically, we've seen a lot of mostly back-levered portfolio-based debt, meaning banks would want to see equity take the risk to construct a project, and then they would put debt on an operational facility and cross-collateralize it with multiple projects. That was kind of the old standard, and we're starting to see a new type of senior debt evolve, which is taking more construction risk and more project level or project specific risk, which again signals confidence in the market. We're seeing a lot of mezzanine debt created recently, and that cost of capital is also coming down in the low teens and high single digits. And we're seeing a lot of funds, both infrastructure funds, mutual funds, and just traditional private equity money that offers a debt product. And those funds are dedicated to environmental social governance. And that's really exciting to see. The other type of creative debt that we see in this space is commercial PACE. It's property assessed clean energy financing. So a lot of times if a host customer is benefiting from a reduction in energy use or water or resource use, they can simply put a tax assessment on that property to finance effectively the energy system. So I'd say in general, we're cautiously optimistic about the market. We're going to continue to deploy probably a few $100 million to the space here over the next few years. And we're really excited about the future. I think it's unquestionable that consumers are demanding RNG from their utility companies. And we're seeing a big push from the transportation sector, the animal ag sector, and the utilities as well. So it's starting to look really good. But with that, I'll pause.
Thank you, Max. Alex, would you like to host and answer the questions or moderate those? Well, I guess if you have questions, you may unmute yourself and go ahead and ask a question of any of our speakers. Well, hearing no questions and not seeing anybody unmute here, I'm going, there we go.
I'll unmute and ask Max a question.
Okay.
Break the ice here. So Max, are you seeing any deals done without a fixed price component?
Yeah, we are. We are. So we might be, and I don't know if I speak on behalf of other banks, of course, right? But we are doing a few fully merchant deals. So we are pretty long on the California LCFS market. Our partnership with USDA allows us to have pretty good visibility into forecasted supply of low carbon fuels, especially renewable diesel. So when we look at the market and we think about the time horizon to get our debt repaid, we're typically doing 10-year loans for digesters, landfills, wastewater treatment plants, if they're going fully merchant. So we think 10 years is the maximum time horizon of risks that we'll take for a fully merchant deal. In exchange for fully merchant, you're going to have a slightly higher interest rate, but we're still talking mid to high single digits, can offer fully fixed rates, and then potentially having some sort of cash sweep, which takes 10 to 15% of EBITDA and puts it in a reserve and can be distributed plus interest if the market performs. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
Okay, good. Maybe you and I should talk after this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it just depends, right? So there's all those different risk parameters, and if you check the box, so to speak, in most or if not all of those other categories, then we'll take bigger exposure on the offtake. So you're pushing and pulling those different levers.
Sure.
This is Alex jumping in. I was having some challenges unmuting myself. First, I want to thank everybody for their participation. We got some great insight from Robert with regard to technical considerations, especially need for uptime. Some really good insight from Jim with regard to project structures, and excellent input from Max with regard to what's really needed and some of the specific debt financing tools that are now available. Max, if there were a single sort of a single thing that you look for that maybe is more important than any other when reviewing a potential application, what might that be?
Sure. It probably sounds obvious, but it's the team. So we really evaluate the team. At the end of the day, we're lending money to a project, and we hope that it mechanically performs. But we trust that Robert and his team have created a product that works. But we're really lending money to people at the end of the day. So we're in partnerships with small business owners or municipalities, and so we're trying to evaluate the team and their competency and their applicable experience.
That's a great answer. I think it always comes back to, do you have the people on hand that have the ability and the readiness to get it done? If you do, you're probably going to go places. And if not, maybe not. If anyone else has any questions, please let us know right away. Alternatively, I'd like to say thank you to Robert and Jim and Max, and we'll look forward to visiting with you a week from now when we launch our online calculator, our fleet conversion tool. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.